Welcome. In today's video, we're going to be working on a 2021 Mazda CX-5 with a 2.5 liter engine. This car just got towed into me and it has what I call a crank but no start condition. You could crank the car, it'll eventually try to start, but it just doesn't. So the check engine light is on, so what I'm going to do is proceed with the scanning the engine ECM to see what data trouble codes we find and take it on from there. So let's get to it. All right, so I am done generating a health report from our scan tool over here, and these are the codes that are present. So we have intake air temperature sensor, system 2 leans, cylinder number 2 misfire detected. Then we have internal control module, torque calculation performance, ignition coil D secondary circuit, engine oil level too low, and lost communication with mass or volume airflow sensor A. And then in our transmission control module, it looks like it also received invalid data from the ECM, and in our ABS computer also it looks like it received invalid data from the ECM. So we're going to ignore these two from now. This is the TCM and the ABS computer, and then we're just going to focus on whatever codes are on here. But now there's a backstory to this, and I'm just going to summarize it. So the owner of this car did obviously experience a drivability concern where the car was just bucking, hesitating, and it wasn't driving normal as it should. It wasn't going within the speed that it was desired. So she pulled over to the side, shut off the car, restarted again with the AC off, and she felt like it was also experiencing the same conditions. Now, eventually she got it home and somebody scanned the car so that there was a cylinder number 2 misfire, purchased spark plugs, purchased ignition coils through Amazon. I think the spark plugs were purchased through the local parts store, and they went ahead and replaced them themselves. Now, I don't know if these codes over here, for example, intake air temperature sensor 1 and ignition coil D secondary circuit, and also this one right here, lost communication with mass or volume airflow sensor. I don't know if these codes were generated due to the fact that the person that worked on this car unplugged those components and had the ignition switch on, because if you know about, when you work on cars, when you have the key on, engine off, this triggers open circuit codes. That may be a possibility. I don't know. What I'm gonna do now is I told her to bring me these spark plugs, and here are the spark plugs that they replaced. Now, looking at them and inspecting them, I don't see anything that's like, out of the four, I don't see something that's sticking out or should be abnormal, or I should say abnormal, other than the other three. All four of them look pretty consistent. However, Mazda does recommend to replace the spark plugs at 75,000 miles, and as you can see, this car has 151,000, so they're way overdue. And these are the original Mazda ignition coils, as you can see in here, with the Mazda emblem stamped on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to diagnose this car from scratch, as if like I didn't know any of this was going on. So let me start by visually inspecting what's under the hood and what's going on. Okay, so taking a look further, I can see that the new coils are installed. One thing that concerns me is these two plugs, these two connectors right here. I don't know if they're, well, it does look like they follow a consistent pattern. This connector is different than this one. This connector is just looking the same as this one, and this is the same as this one. I'm guessing they're connected the way they should be, and they're not crossed. Here, what I noticed with the intake, with the mass airflow sensor, is it looks like it hasn't been touched. There's consistent dust in here. However, I do see that the air filter box isn't properly secure, so it does seem like somebody was in there. Let's take a look underneath. So it looks like an air filter was installed recently, but whoever closed this didn't properly secure it where it should be. Those tabs should go in those openings. So okay, let's take a further look and see what we got going on. Other than a leaky valve cover gasket, visually I can't really see anything that will cause a no start condition. Let's check the oil level, because it said that the oil level is low. Oil level is indeed a little bit low. We'll add some oil on there. I don't know why that is. I don't know who did the last oil change. I don't know if it has an oil leak. So far, the only oil leak I see is the valve cover gasket, but that's not enough to cause that much of a low oil level. All right, so I like to start with the factory parts. So let's remove these ignition coils that were installed from Amazon, and let's put the factory coils back in here. All right, so when I was unplugging this, I do see that this wire, which it was connected, this connector was connected into number 3 cylinder, and this connector was connected into number 4 cylinder. So because of that bend that it has, with 151,000 miles, you would think that that bend didn't happen just overnight. I think maybe, I may be wrong, but it could be that this one belongs here and this one belongs over here. So let's go ahead and plug that here, unplug this one here, plug that one over there, and then I'm going to plug this one here. And this one does look like it belongs here. So yeah, for sure that one belongs here. For sure this one belongs on number 2. I don't know if this one belongs on number 4. And I don't know if this one belongs on number 3. So I just swap those around and let's see what happens. All right, I don't know if that was the actual issue, but the car actually started this time. Now, this is a common mistake that I've seen happen over time when you have an inexperienced person working on typical repair. So the fact that this wiring harness for this connector is bent that way, it lets me to believe that it was like that for a long time, and that's because it actually stretches out to number 4. Whereas this one is almost like this one right here. It connects right to number 3. Now, I wanted to believe that they actually did a one by one, but what they probably ended up doing is they unplugged all 4 of them and then installed the new coils and then overlooked at the fact that they could have possibly connect number 4 into number 3, number 3 into number 4. Okay, so here are the aftermarket ignition coils. And these are the 4 Mazda ignition coils that I'm going to install back. Now, I'm not installing this in any particular order, but if one is failing, we'll know which one it is. So I don't know about you, but I don't trust aftermarket ignition coils. I never had a good experience with them. You let me know down in the comments if you've had, and if you did, how long did they last? Are they still in your car? Are they still working? They could get you back out on the road, but it doesn't last like that very long. I remember last time I used them was in a '06 Toyota Tundra. That was for my uncle's truck. I replaced all 6, which was a bad idea because when you go online, usually they want to sell you the whole set instead of just one. You could just buy one, but it makes financially it makes more sense to get a whole set. So put one on there and didn't even last a whole year. I don't feel comfortable having these ignition coils in there being aftermarket. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the factory Mazda ones, I'm going to install them, and if it indeed was that a ignition coil went bad, we're gonna figure out which one it was, and then I'm going to mark it, and I'm going to have her get a Mazda ignition coil to get this car back out on the road. I don't know how much these engines are designed to detect low oil level because it wasn't even, it was maybe about a little bit more than half a quart low. I'm going to further look underneath, make sure that we don't have a large leak or whatever. I don't think it does. We would have seen it already. The only leak I see is, like I mentioned earlier, valve cover gasket, but that's where we're at now. So let me get to that part and we'll report back. Now, here's a lesson to be learned in case you're ever doing something like this for the first time. Do one at a time, okay? So, spark plugs to be replaced, unplug the connector, remove the ignition coil, replace the spark plug, put the ignition coil back in, reinstall the connector. Again, move on to number 2. Same order, unplug, remove coil, remove spark plug, install new spark plug, install coil, connector back in. That way you shouldn't have a problem like this one apparently did. What they did here is unplugged all of them and did them all at once, and that shouldn't have happened, but it's a mistake. It could happen to anyone. This is the one that was bent. Not bent, but it was shaped this way, which means it probably lived over here its whole entire life. So this one should be number 3. and this one should be number 4. Let's put our oil cap back on. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to go ahead and get inside the car, go to data, live data, and then I'm going to see if this car is still misfiring. Let's clear our codes and let's see which code comes back. And then we'll move on to our next step. All right, so here's how the car will start. Does have a slight hesitation when it first starts, but that's because it may be due to the cylinders being a little bit saturated with fuel, since it had multiple, I'm using the word multiple because I don't know however many times this car got cranked before and the cylinders just filled up with fuel. So as it's burning it, because I do smell like this rich fuel smell, let's go ahead and take a look at the scan tool and see if this car is misfiring. Okay, and you can see that there's no codes on here because everything shows normal. So now we are going to start the car. Okay, so it's been running for about 5 seconds and just seems normal. There's no check engine light on, only our tire pressure light is on, but we're not worried about that right now. All right, so after our 5-mile road test, we ended up with 4 misfire counts on cylinder number 1, 2 on cylinder number 2, 1 on cylinder number 3, and another one on cylinder number 4. What does that mean? Well, that usually means that there are tiny irregularities inside the combustion chamber, and it's being picked up by the engine control module, or the PCM, power control module, as per Mazda calls it. You see, when there's a sudden change in the quality of the fuel, it picks up 1 or 2 misfires on different cylinders, so it registers as 1 misfire count or 2 misfire counts. If you're driving through a rough road, and there's, a slight movement in the engine, that could also register an irregularity in one of the cylinders, so that it will register as 1 or 2 or 3 misfire counts. Maybe when the AC clutch turns on and off, that also will trigger that, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. Point of the matter is, if you come back home or if you come back to the shop, if there are any DTCs that are output by triggering that check engine light on, then you know that you have a problem. Now, if there's no check engine light on and you go back in and then you see that there's a pending DTC, then you know that you're eventually going to have a problem. So yes, dig further. But in this case, I came back, I went back in, there's no codes. So I would say this car is good to return it back to the client. So what is the takeaway here? Well, an experience was learned from this situation. We know now that in case that we do want to tackle something that we've never done before, read, take good pictures, try not to do too much at once, take tiny steps. In this particular situation would have been just unplug that ignition coil and do 1 cylinder at a time when you're working on it. So this is not the first time I've seen this, ironically. This is something that does happen from time to time, especially when you don't have experience. But if you are going to tackle something like this yourself, make sure you do that. Make sure you take 1 step at a time. Don't get carried away with yourself. So as much as I expected for this thing to be actually something different, something, an internal failure or an outside failure, it turned out to be nothing. In this case, it was just worn spark plugs. So looking at the repair manual here, Mazda does recommend spark plugs to be replaced in this particular engine every 1,000 kilometers. That's roughly around 75,000 miles. This car's out 151 and has never been replaced before. So the original cause, the original failure was worn out spark plugs. That's what caused this car to hesitate and caused the car to misfire and eventually to end up here with me. The lesson here was, don't neglect your maintenance. If your scheduled maintenance does say to do certain things at a certain intervals, do it, because it'll save you all the trouble that this person just went through and just having to deal with this whole chaos that just happened here. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention engine oil level low. I did check underneath and it did have an oil leak, and that oil leak came from the oil filter. Now, whoever the last person was that changed the oil, definitely over tighten the oil filter. Engine oil filters do not need to be super tight. I can't tell you how many times I came across this. When you know you have to use a tool to and put your muscle into it to lose an oil filter, if you can't break a loose like that, you overtimed it.
Yeah, I don't like this gasket.
Tighten your oil filter by hand only. That's why I have this right here. Now I'm talking about the screw-on oil filters, not the canister ones, but when you have an oil filter, just always tighten it by hand. Don't use tools to tighten it because you're going to over tighten the crap out of it and you may just damage the oil gasket that's in here. That may have been the case on this one. I'm not too sure, but most oil filters do come pre-lubed. So for example, this one right here does not come lubed up. So I'm going to just take a little bit of the new oil, just put a nice film on here. That way when you screw it on, it doesn't create friction between the surface and it doesn't damage the gasket. It's always what I've done and I never had a problem. That's actually the reason why this engine oil level was low. The oil filter was leaking. I just did a whole new oil change and that was it for that one. So anyways, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope I provided a guideful way to maintain your vehicle and what consequences do happen when you don't. So if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing, give it a like to this video. As always, thanks a lot for educating yourself, making progress, and best to you.